theyeshiva.net.
Tayre Yidden, a gute Woch, a freiliche Woch, a gut gebencht Jahr to you and your families, b'toich Klal Yisrael. They tell a story that in the city of Posen in Poland, it was a city of Rebbe Akiva Eger, there was a Baal Tekeya. He was a Jew, he blew shofar for many, many years. This was his chazokah, this was his thing. And then somehow, the Rav felt that he got caught up a little bit too much in what they called then the Haskalah, the Enlightenment, modernity. So he demoted him from blowing the shofar, Tkiyah shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Instead, he gave him another job. He had to give him something. His job was to blow shofar by the end of Ne'ilah. Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, to blow the last Tkiyah at the end of Yom Kippur. This Jew who was progressive and he had connections ran to the moshel, to the governor, and he famased the rabbi. He informed on the rabbi, he said, just because I'm more progressive and I'm more open-minded and I'm more liberal and I'm more in touch with the times, he threw me out of a position I held for so many years and he got rid of me. It's not fair. So the governor called in the Rav of Posen for an interview. And he said, I hear that this is what you did. So he says, on the contrary, not I demoted him, I promoted him. Sir, he says, Your Honor, what is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar? Even this Gentile knew, he said, Yom Kippur. So he said, he used to have a job on Rosh Hashanah. I promoted him to Yom Kippur. Now he has a job on Yom Kippur. He used to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, I blow shofar on Yom Kippur. The governor says, oh, I'm so sorry, I apologize, I heard that you threw him out. He says, no, I elevated him. So he calls back the old Baal Tekeya and he says, why do you say such gossip about the rabbi here? He promoted you from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. So now he's going to start explaining the Gentile governor of Posen the difference between a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa and a minig Yisrael, and say that Tkiyah shofar on Rosh Hashanah, the mitzvah d'oraisa, it's a biblical commandment. It's a serious moment. Rachmana amatiku, like the Gemara said. And Yom Kippur, stam up zaminik. Stam a custom. How do you compare? You can't explain this to him because the man won't begin to understand. You have to understand how the mechanism of halacha works. Mechanism of Yiddishkeit works. So he says, come on. Rosh Hashanah, 100 sounds. Meya Kailas. He gave me Yom Kippur, you know what? One sound. One tkiya, I'm done. One sound. The governor says, no. Once you have a shofar in the hand, blows before the wilst. Once the shofar is in your hand, blow. Who's stopping you? Do 100, do 500, do 1,000. That's how some speakers feel. They get a shofar in the hand, or some people call it a mic. I'm a blast. You have it in your hand. This is already not an excuse. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Don't start feeling sad for yourself and this. You have a shofar blow. But the truth is that it's more than a cute anecdote, which it is. There's also, I think, an insight, a Musa Haskel, a deep lesson here that I want to share with you tonight. Night of Slichas, b'Motzaei Menucha, Kidam Nucha Tchila, as we get here together and we come together. Hine matoiv u'manoyim sheves achim kam yochat. Everybody knows that in the month of Elul and Tishrei, we say every day, twice a day, at least twice a day, the kapitel in Tehillim, kapitel Chav Zayin, chapter 27 of Psalms, LeDavid Hashem, Oiri v'yishi mimiyira, Hashem ha'yischai mimiyevchat. A whole Elul, and a great part of the month of Tishrei. Medrash says, Oiri is Rosh Hashanah, Yishi is Yom Kippur, Tzpeneni Besukkah is Sukkos. Over there, David HaMelech says, everybody knows, Achas sha'alti, me'es adinoi, oisa avakesh, shifti beveis adinoi, kol yemei chaya, elachzus benoyem adinoi, levaker beichol. What does it mean? I ask for one thing. Achas sha'alti, oisa avakesh. This is what I yearn for. I want to sit in the house of Hashem all the days of my life to see, to observe the delight of Hashem and to visit in His holy chamber. It sounds like a very pious, spiritual, sensitive prayer. A Jew speaks to Hashem and he says, I ask for one thing, Achas sha'alti. I don't have many requests. Everything boils down to one point. Oisa avakesh. I want to be with you, kol yemei chayeh. I want to be connected to you all the days of my life. You open up a Medrash Tehillim on the Pasuk, or a Yalkut Shemoni on the Pasuk. Omer Rebbe bar Kahana. Rebbe, the son of Kahana, said, Achas sha'alti me'es Hashem, Malchus sha'al. He asked to be a king. He asked for royalty. He asked for Malchus. That's what Rebbe says. And I ask you, really? I thought, when I read the Pasuk, David HaMelech asked to sit in the house of Hashem his whole life. Comes Rebbe and says, no. He wants to be the monarch. He wants the crown. He wants to be the next president. Not only the president, he wants to be the king, Malchus Shah. Where did Rebbe even see this in the words? And if that's what David HaMelech asked, why did David say it in such a strange way? He said, I want to be a melech. Why does Rebbe impose kivayachol, what seems like deception? This duplicity in his words. He's saying, Shifti beveis Hashem kol yemei chaya. Says Rebbe, no. Evil the crown. He wants the throne and he wants the crown. That's what he's looking for. Why did he even think to put it in those words? Was zuchter? Well, what's he busy? What is he interested in? What is Rebbe trying to convey? He has to find. No, don't think he asked for what he said. He has to be a melech. And one of the interpretations in this, perhaps, is the Rebbe is actually conveying the words of what David HaMelech is saying. You see, If anybody knows a little bit about David HaMelech's life, we know that his entire life was filled with intrigue and conflict and danger and clever maneuvering. Somebody was always out to get him. His own father-in-law, Shaul, tried to kill him many times. His own son, Avshalom, staged a successful rebellion against him and almost eliminated him. From close and far, he had enemies who were always pursuing him. Mizmor LeDavid b'Yosoi b'Midbar Yehuda Tzomelecha nafshi ki geishuni hayoim milistapeh b'nachlos Hashem LeDavid b'shanoisoi es tamel lifnei Avimelech. Among the Philistines, he had to feign insanity. He had to make believe he was a crazy person just to be able to survive. He was a fugitive. He was constantly in exile. He was always on the run. He barely had a day of peace throughout his entire life. Such a person naturally is overcome by so much stress, by so much anxiety. And when he davens, what does he ask for? He says, just give me one night's sleep. Just give me a peaceful night. Just get rid of my enemies. Get rid of my enemies. Let me get a little revenge. Let me have a little safety. Give me a roof over my head. I shouldn't have to hide in caves. I shouldn't have to jump out the window middle of the night because my father-in-law is about to kill me. Give me a roof over my head. Give me some bread to eat, some clothes to wear. Let me just have a little safety, a little comfort, a little security. That's what you would expect. Comes Rebbe and says, Malchus Shaul. He never prayed like a beggar on the run. He never prayed like a homeless fugitive. He prayed like a melech. He had a royal appetite. He never allowed himself to succumb to the stress, to the anxiety of the moment, to become overwhelmed by all of the pressures of life. He had his eye, he had his vision on the big picture, on the ultimate goal of life. He never reduced himself into an insecure, mediocre person. Of course he wanted peace, of course he wanted security, of course he wanted to get rid of his enemies. But Malchus Shaul, he asked like a melech, he asked like a royal. He didn't surrender to a life of quiet desperation. He looked at the ultimate end goal of life. What's the ultimate end goal of life? If you had all your money and you had all your covet and you had all your taivas and you had everything you wanted, you can get rid of all of the stresses. What's the ultimate? Shifti beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai lachzois b'noyam Hashem ulevaker behecholoi. To have dveikus, to have oneness, to be one with truth, to be one with reality, to have dveikus, to be intimate with Hashem, which is ultimately intimate with yourself, with your own core. Malchus Shaul. He asked like a melech, and a melech, even when he's a fugitive, he's still a king. Even when he doesn't have what to eat, he's still a royal. His horizons were large. Why do we say this in Elul and Tishrei? Everyone sitting here, not everybody, but a lot of us, we're stressed, we're overwhelmed. Everyone has their Parshas. This challenge, that challenge, these bills, that bills, these things bothering you, issues of health, issues of finance, issues of stress, issues in your relationship, your marriage, your relationship with your children, your relationship with yourself. That's a big one. If you have one. Relationship with your work, relationship with Hashem, who you are, who the bist, yeah. They say there was once a Yid in Russia, a Chassidish Yid in Russia. So in Russia, you couldn't just walk around. You had to have ID, and you had to have a job, you had to be registered. So a policeman stops him, and he says, Wer bist du? Who are you? Wo gehst du? Where are you going? And what do you do with your life? He looks at me, he says, wow. I would pay you 50 ruble every day to ask me those questions. Who are you? Where are you going? And what are you doing with your life? Ayeka. Comes this time of the year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Selichos. Comes David HaMelech and teaches you how to ask. Malchus Shaul, don't ask like a beggar. Ask like a king. Don't ask for smallness. Ask for greatness. Don't surrender to mediocrity. Somebody once said, a father once told his son, I'm not worried that you're going to aim high and miss. I'm much more worried that you're going to aim low and never miss. That's what I'm worried about. Malchus Shal, he aimed high. It's a word from the Chidush Harim. Ata bechartanu mikol ha'amim, ahavta isanu v'ratzisa banu, v'roimamtanu mikol al-shoynes. So the literal translation is, he elevated us from all of the languages, from all of the nationalities. Said the Chidush Harim here, v'roimamtanu mikol al-shoynes, uns aufgehoben von alle Sprachen, also ein Stocken Sprach, zu ausdrücken, wie hoch mir ist. Mikol al-shoynes, there's no language, there's no words to be able to express your Rebbe. Stuck in Lashon, even a poet, you have the language of poetry, you have the language of music, very subtle, deep languages. You have the language of words. It's also a language that some people use. Mikol al-shoynes, also stuck converted to bring it out. Malchus Shal. Ask like a king. Don't ask like a mediocre midget, because that's who you are. See your potential. Aim high on every level, even if that means that I'm going to miss, and not miss once, but miss many times. There's so much potential that Knesset Yisrael has. There's so much light that people have. There's so much beauty that people have. There's so much infinite dignity in every one of your souls. But people are scared to aim high because I'm going to miss. So I just aim low, always low, and I never miss. I never miss my target. Miss! Miss and miss again. But Malchus Shal. Achas Sha'alti. And then you'll realize that your Sha'alti will become connected to the Achas, to the oneness. I once read an interview, a very interesting interview. I'll share with you. A very, very wealthy man, his name is Joseph Plumeri. Extremely wealthy and affluent individual. And some of you have been to Chicago. One of the largest, tallest structures in the world is called the Sears Towers. For many, many years, it was the tallest structure on the entire planet, certainly in the Western Hemisphere. Now I think it's second to the tallest. But Sears Towers was huge. And this fellow, Joseph Plumeri, happened to change the name. Today it's not called Sears Towers, it's called Willis Towers, because that's the name of his company. He's the CEO of Willis Holding Group, so he changed it from Sears Towers to Willis Towers. What did he do? He needed a place for his company, so he went to the owner of Sears Towers. And he said, I want a place. How much? Just 2%. 2% of the space he needs for his company. The man said, okay, great. Could we sign the lease? He says, no, one more thing. It's always been called Sears Towers since, I think, 1973 when it was built. But it's already an old and stale name, and Sears is not there anymore. And I think you need a fresh, vibrant name. It's time to change the name. And they changed the name. From Sears Towers became Willis Towers. That's what it's called today. I don't know what people call it, but that's the official name of it. So I was reading this interview that somebody had with a journalist, and he said, how in the world, you have 2% of space, how in the world did you get to change the name of one of the tallest structures to your name that you wanted, from Sears Towers to Willis Towers? And he said, I asked. I asked. And I thought, wow, I asked. But when you don't ask, the answer is always no. When you ask, the answer could be no, but the answer could be yes. Achas sha'alti malchus sha'al. Ayid is a melech. Kol Yisrael b'nei melachim heim, the Mishnah says, and in Zohar state, Kol Yisrael melachim heim, in Tikkun Zohar. Not just a b'nei melech, a melech. Comes this time of the year, think big, think grand, think like a revolutionary, Think like a melech, malchus shoal. Rabbi Yoli.
Alti meyes Hashem Alti meyes Hashem O Esavakei Alti meyes Hashem Achashualti meyes Hashem Oboy Savavake Oy Shifti beveis Hashem Kovol Yemei Chayoy Lazois benoyam benoyam Hashem Edvakei behaycholoi Shifti beveis Hashem Kovol Yemei Chayoy Lazois benoyam benoyam Hashem Edvakei behaycholoi V'yizimam Elul Moshe Kovol Yemei Chayoy Lazois benoyam benoyam Hashem Edvakei behaycholoi Shifti beveis Hashem Kovol Yemei Chayoy Lazois benoyam benoyam Hashem Edvakei behaycholoi Uyavach Hashualti Meyes Hashem Achashualti meyes Hashem Achashualti meyes Hashem Ovoy Savavake Shifti beveis Hashem Kovol Yemei Chayoy Lazois benoyam benoyam Hashem Edvakei behaycholoi Shifti beveis Hashem Kovol Yemei Chayoy Lazois benoyam benoyam Hashem Edvakei behaycholoi Ishbati yeschem b'nois Yerushalayim Iftitzei as the hoidim Matagidi lo Ishbati yeschem b'nois Yerushalayim Iftitzei as the hoidim Matagidi lo Shechoilas ahavoni Shechoilas ahavoni Matagidi lo Shechoilas ahavoni Matagidi lo Shechoilas ahavoni Oy matagidi loy shechoilas ahavoni matagidi loy shechoy la Savo oy matagidi loy shechoy la Savo oy matagidi loy shechoy la Savo oy matagidi loy shechoy la Savo matagidi loy shechoy la Savo oy matagidi loy shechoy la Savo matagidi loy shechoy la Savo oy matagidi loy shechoy la Savo matagidi loy shechoy la Savo matagidi loy shechoy la Savo matagidi loy shechoy la Savo
Tired Yidden, precious brothers and sisters. Today's Haftarah, Yeshaya Perek Samach. It opens up, Yeshaya Hanavi says, Si'i Soviv Einayich Uri'i. Lift up your eyes and look around you and see, Kulam Nikbitzu Bo'ulach. Everybody gathered to come to you, Banayich Meirachak Yavoyu. Your children came from close and from far. Kulam Nikbitzu Bo'ulach. I'm going to try to paraphrase, if I may, the words of our prophet Yeshaya Hanavi and say to us, Si'i Saviv Einayich Uri'i. Lift up your eyes and look who's here in this room. Besides all those who are joining us virtually all over the world. Kulam Nikbitzu Bo'ulach. You have here Jews from every type of background, all walks of life. I see Streimlich and Borsalinos, small yarmulkes and big yarmulkes, this type of hat, that type of hat, no hat, almost a hat, interesting hats, boring hats, all types of walks of life, all backgrounds, all different types of kehillas. Kulam nikbitzu bo'ulach. That's the matzav today of the Jewish people. Anybody who has their finger on the pulse of the Jewish people know that after years in which machloikis, fragmentation, gossip actually worked, it worked, it even turned you into a pretty prominent fellow. If you can get up on the bimah and speak out against a certain movement or a certain kehillah, suddenly you became a gewaldike person. Today, the oilam doesn't buy it, especially the youth. They don't want to hear it. It doesn't speak to them. You realize you lost your crowd. The matzav today is a matzav of si'i, lift up your eyes, uri'i, kulam nikbutzu bo'ulach. It's a situation where all the Jewish people are yearning, are craving for love, for oneness, for cohesiveness, for unity. Sick and tired of politics, of lies, of cover-up, especially in the name of God, of zealotry for the sake of egotism, but all l'shem shamayim. People are sick and tired of it. They're looking for harila emes. Be honest, be vulnerable, be real. It's a tremendous moment. Take it in, appreciate it. And if you don't know the person near you, you can even tell him hello. And give him a varam shalom aleichem. And if nobody is looking, if the video is not on you, you give him a hug. I want to tell you a gewaldige Maisa. I want to share with you a story. I was Thursday in the White Shul in the Five Towns, and I shared with them this story. And I think it's a story that happened in Europe a number of years ago, but it's a story that happens in every person's life. There's a Yid, his name is Rabbi Moshe Erlanger. He's a Jew from Eretz Yisrael. And he was on business. He was on business in Europe. There was a problem with the weather and the flights were delayed, and he could not make it in time to Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv to land in Eretz Yisrael in time for Yom Kippur. The airport closes before Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael, and they had to land in Germany. He landed in Frankfurt, Germany, and he realized he has to spend Yom Kippur in Frankfurt. He needed a hotel, so the airline booked him a hotel that would be walking distance to the great synagogue of Frankfurt. He wasn't ready to be Yom Kippur in Germany. He was planning to be Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael in the Holy Land. And it was hard for him. 25 years, you know when you have a shul that you really love, and sometimes you have a shul that you really don't love, but you know when you have a shul that you really, really love, you love the chazan, imagine, you love the Bal Tefillah, you love even the rabbi, you mamish, you love the people, you love the chevra. Yeah. In contrast, they say there was once a Cossack. The Cossacks burst into a shul the night of Yom Kippur, and they hijacked the Rav, the Chazan, and the president. They took him to the forest. They said, "We're going to shoot all of you, but we're nice people, so we're going to grant you your last wish." The Rav says, "For 2 months I'm preparing my Yom Kippur sermon. You can't just kill me. Stamaza, you first have to let me give the sermon, and then you'll kill me. No problem." Chazan, what about you? He says, 3 months I'm preparing already the Nusach for Yom Neirayim. Those beautiful, beautiful melodies. You can't just kill me this way. I have to first sing, and then you'll kill me. They turn to the president, "What's your last wish?" He says, "Kill me first." But sometimes you have a shul, and you mamish love it. You know, you love the matzav. And this shul, this Reb Moshe had such a shul. The davening was beautiful. The divrei Torah were inspiring. The camaraderie was elevating. The atmosphere was electrifying. The ambiance was simply stimulating and inspiring. And now he doesn't have it. He loved the nigunim, he loved the davening, he loved the chevra. And now he's in Germany, in Frankfurt. But that's where the hashgacha brought him. He also didn't have clothes for Yom Kippur. So he eats the little tuna or sardines that he had for the Suda Mavsekas, and he goes to shul. He had just had his regular weekday clothes. He had a talis, he didn't have a kittel, he had slippers, he didn't have a machzer. He comes into the Frankfurt Great Synagogue before Kol Nidre, before sunset. It was a nice walking distance from the hotel to the shul, but he could make it to there and back. And he walks into the shul. The Great Synagogue of Frankfurt was destroyed by the Nazis, one of the most beautiful shuls in Europe. But in 1946, they already renovated it and decorated it, rededicated it so that Jews could daven there. It has close to 2,000 seats. Moshe walks into the shul in Frankfurt. Beautiful, splendid. But it's for Germany, it's a bisschen kalt, you know. It's a little cold. Packed, it's Yom Kippur night, the Olam comes, the Gabbai comes over to him, says, "Shalom Aleichem, Favana Kim Tayid." Where do you come from? So I come from Eretz Yisrael, I got stuck here, I'm away from my family, away from my community. You see, I'm not dressed for the occasion. He says, don't worry, we'll take care of you. Brings him a kittel, brings him a machzer, gives him a nice seat to sit down. And he sits down in shul. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says, Ani b'mayre v'libi b'mizrach. I'm in the west, my heart is in the east. He was in Germany, but his heart was with his family, with his community. It was difficult to be Yom Kippur away. Chazan gets up, al das ha-mokoim ve'al das ha-kol, b'yeshiva shel mayla, b'yeshiva shel mata, no matirim l'spavlim avayonim. Night of Yom Kippur, all the mechitzas, all the walls between Klal Yisrael are obliterated. And those Jews who live with Yom Kippur a whole year, the mechitzas are always obliterated. The Chazan starts Kol Nidrei. Hi, Kol Nidrei. Every Jew, the heart is moved by the Kol Nidrei melody. But Reb Moshe felt that there was something different. The Chazan broke down sobbing as he began to sing Kol Nidrei. And with each time he repeated Kol Nidrei, his voice became so much more heartfelt. It stirred him to the core. Such a display of emotion, of his srakshas, of his slavos by Kol Nidrei he never heard in his life. Finishes Kol Nidrei, Shechiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu l'zman hazeh, the David Ma'ariv. Kinei kacho oimer b'yavada For such a beautiful davening, and he says, you have to answer my question. I didn't know that in Frankfurt I'm going to hear the most emotional Kol Nidrei I ever heard in my life. Me'efa baso mama secha. Where, what, when, what were you thinking during Kol Nidre? Basa Geshen, what were you crying for? Something happened to your family, Chas v'shalom. Is there some crisis in your life? Is there something that you associate with this moment? The man looks at him and he says, not many people ask me the question, but since you asked, talk about asking, you have to ask. Since you asked, you deserve an answer. And let me tell you, it was worth getting stuck in Frankfurt to be able to hear the Maisa, to be able to hear the story. My name is Tzaddik Greenwald. They call me Tzaddik. I've been the Chazan in Frankfurt for quite a few years, son of Holocaust survivors. To come to Frankfurt Yom Kippur and to daven here, I feel to be a great privilege. The very city, the very country from which the greatest hatred and venom came out of the Jewish people, people that decimated a third of our nation 75 years ago, to be able to daven in front of 2,000 Jews in the soil of Frankfurt, of this cursed country, to be able to say together, Shechiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu l'zman hazeh, to be able to say v'yeda kol pol kiyata piyaltoi, to be able to say u'bechein tein kavod li'amecha tehila li'reyecha v'sikvatoiva l'dershecha u'pischin pel ha'meyachelim loch tein kavod li'amecha. The nation that has been hounded and hunted down. As an Auschwitz survivor once told me, he says, Rabbi Jacobson, he said, you and your children treat cockroaches, mosquitoes with more dignity, with more respect than we were treated. In Auschwitz, he was one of Mengele's Chevra. Those were his words to me. You treat a mosquito with more dignity. Is to come back to Frankfurt and to say Tein Kavod Li'amecha is awe-inspiring for me. And he says, it's already worth it. I come to Frankfurt, I daven, it's an incredible experience. One year, Yom Kippur was over. Screamed Ashma Yisrael, Baruch Shem Koid Malchus Elolam Vod, Hashem Hu Elokim, Hashem Hu Elokim, Hashem Hu Elokim 7 times. We blew the shofar, we said L'shon Haba B'Yerushalayim. And you know, some Jews after Ne'ilah get a little hungry. Present company excluded. But some Jews get a little hungry and they do a Shnela Ma'ariv. Fast Ma'ariv, because it's the first mitzvah of the year after Yom Kippur. First mitzvah is the Chma'ariv, that's why they chop it very fast. Chatoy v'echel, chatoy foshti. Finishes Ma'ariv, he says, be honest, I was starving. And more than starving, I was thirsty. Chab kechazan the whole Yom Kippur, kol nidrei shachris, musaf min chanila, my voice was parched, it was dry. I was just yearning for a cup of water. Everybody left the shul. You know, the chazan sometimes leaves the last. I fold up my talis. I fold up my kittel. I put it away for another year. I remove my cantorial uniform that they still wear in Frankfurt. The front door is closed. The lights are off. Even the janitor left already. There's a side exit door. I go out, Motzaei Yom Kippur, from the side exit door, the tzaddik says. I'm really exhausted. I'm looking forward to go to my room and have some meal. The baskel comes out. I don't know how many of you have been to Frankfurt, but the synagogue, the shul is huge and beautiful, something special, splendid. The old European architecture from before the war. And the gates, the gates are humongous, protecting the entrance to the front of the shul. I come out from the side, I walk by the gates, and suddenly Reb Tzaddik says, I see a Jew. He must look 60 or so. He has a white silk yarmulke. On top of his head you could see it's not the makom kavua of the yarmulke. You could see he just put it on a few minutes ago. You see the fit. And he's standing by the gate and he's looking and he's perplexed. And he sees me. He has a heavy Russian accent. You can hear the accent, and he asks me a question with a mix of German and Yiddish. The question is, Farvos seinen die Teuren von der Schul verschlossen? Why are the gates of the shul locked? I look at him. Farvos seinen die Teuren verschlossen? Why are the gates locked? Is heit ba nacht nicht the Nacht, was man sucht Kol Nidre? Is tonight not the night that we say Kol Nidre? Reb Tzaddik says, I didn't have a heart to answer. I was quiet. He says, Bitte, entfer mich. Please, answer me. Heit ba nacht sucht man nicht Kol Nidre? Don't you say Kol Nidre tonight? Why is this shul locked? Am I the only one here tonight? We are all the Jews. He's pleading for an answer. So Reb Tzaddik says to him, Kol Nidre is given nechten banacht. Tonight is the night after Yom Kippur. Last night was Yom Kippur. Last night the gates were open. Tonight the gates are closed. I'm so sorry you came one day late for Kol Nidre. He says, the Jew looks at me and he literally breaks down, starts sobbing like a baby, and this is what he says. I never ever missed a Kol Nidre in my life. My parents were both survivors of the Holocaust, Russian Jews. They remained in Eastern Europe after the war, but they drifted away from Yiddishkeit. One thing they kept, every Yom Kippur they observed, and every single Yom Kippur my father, not a religious Jew, came to shul. And before he died, he looked at me and he said, my dear son, how do you know that you're a Jew? From wannen weist dat du bist a Yid, how do you know you're a Jew? That Yom Kippur you come to shul for Kol Nidre. And every single year I followed my father's will and I came to shul. I never ever missed a Kol Nidre. This is the first Yom Kippur I missed. And Reb Tzaddik says, I'm looking at a 60-year-old Jew with a white silk yarmulke on his head, crying like a baby and saying, it means I'm not part of the Jewish people anymore. Ich bin nicht kein Yid. The connection has just been severed because my father told me this is what it means that you're part of the Jewish people. The chain of Judaism stopped and will not continue. And he's standing there and crying. And Reb Tzaddik Greenwald the Chazan, who's on the way to his hotel room to eat Motzaei Yom Kippur, a nice meal, you know the feeling. Motzaei Yom Kippur, I don't have to describe it to this crowd. Says to Reb Moshe, says, at that moment, I knew exactly what I have to do. I looked at the Jew and I said, Ich bin der Chazan von der Frankfurter Shul. I am the cantor of the great synagogue of Frankfurt. Hast nicht verfällt, kein Kol Nidre. You didn't miss Kol Nidre. Komm mit mir. Come with me to the Shul. Und wir wollen singen Kol Nidre zusammen. We'll do Kol Nidre together. He takes him into Shul. pitch black. You know, a shul in Germany, pitch black. It's not 18 Forshay. There's always either renovation or somebody drinking soup or somebody doing a minion. Frankfurt doesn't work that way. So there's Satmans and there's Vizhnitz, so there's the Shtiblach and Zichur Moshe, and it's not Archaim. It's pitch dark. He puts on a little light in the front, he brings this Jew to the front. He gives him a kittel, he gives him a talis, he gives him a machzor with a Russian translation, and he puts him right near him. Reb Tzaddik goes to the stender, and he starts, says, I have to be honest with you. He says, I've been doing Kol Nidre for years, but usually, who's there? 2,000 people are sitting. And as much as I'm thinking about Yom Kippur, and as much as I'm thinking about Hashem, and as much as I'm thinking about the words, I'm also thinking about, I want the 2,000 people to like me. Those of you here who are Bali Tefillah, Chazanim, Yoli, the trachst am alazoi. In Umal, was trachst? Those of you who are speakers, rabbis, singers, Chazanim, Bali Tefillah, no. Even those of us who are idealistic people. But for it, it's 2,000 people. I want to impress the crowd. I want they should like it. I want they should like me. They say there was a chazan in New Jersey once, Rosh Hashanah. He finished davening, the president of the shul comes over to him and says, you were horrible. The worst chazan we ever had in the history. Never again. He comes home. He tells his wife, I'm not making kiddush. She says, why? He says, I'm fasting. He says, you fasting? What do you have with fasting? You've been eating your whole life. You can't fool your wife. So he tells her the truth. He says, I'm in a bad mood. I finished davening. The president of the shul comes over to me and tells me I was the worst, never again. You know, a Jewish wife always knows the right thing to tell her husband, to boost his self-confidence, to make him feel like a man, like a king. She always has the right oisis, the right way, the right mahalachim. Bini Yisrael, this is part of the Bini Yisrael. She looks at her husband, she says, the president, an idiot, what does he know? He was just repeating what the whole shul says. So Reb Tzaddik says, I have to be honest with you. It's Yom Kippur, it's the holiest day of the year, but I'm singing for the crowd. I'm singing for the crowd. He says, but this Yom Kippur, there was no crowd. It wasn't even Yom Kippur. I couldn't even tell myself it was Yom Kippur. It wasn't Yom Kippur. There was no crowd, there was no audience, there was nothing there, nobody was looking, there was no prophet, there was no president, there was no board of directors, there was no gabbai, there was no shamish, there was no millionaire, there was nobody there. It was me and an old Russian Jew sitting there, didn't even know what Kol Nidre is, didn't even know what Yom Kippur is, couldn't even get the day right. So who was I singing Kol Nidre with? I was singing Kol Nidre, just me and Hashem and a Jewish soul. And the whole shul was empty, there were 2,000 empty seats, pitch dark. And he says, I have to tell you, at that moment, I felt all of Jewish history present in the shul. I felt this Jews' ancestors all the way back to Avraham Avinu. I felt all my ancestors back to Maimon Har Sinai. I felt all the Jews of Frankfurt, Medoira, Doiris, all the neshamas that were there. I felt that I was talking to the Shechina himself saying Kol Nidrei. I felt that it was so genuine, it was so real. There was no incentives, no ulterior motives. I just started to cry. This Jew started to cry. And we said Kol Nidrei 3 times. Then I said, it's Ma'ariv, it's Fort Motzaei Yom Kippur, you still got to say Shema. I said the Shema with him. We spent a few minutes davening to Hashem and we finished. The Jew takes off his kittel, he comes over to me and he says, Ich will dir ewig dankbar sein. I will forever be grateful to you for helping me know that I'm still part of the Jewish people. He gives me a hug. So I can't thank you enough for what you did for me. And we walk out together from the side door, close the door, he goes home, and I go home to break my fast. Just 2 years later, I come back to shul. Yom Kippur at night, a Jew comes over to me after davening and he says, you remember me? I take a look, I said, of course I remember you. It was you and I who did our own Kol Nidrei. And the Jew says, you'll never ever know what you did for me. You gave me back my soul. You gave me back my Jewish soul. I can't thank you enough. And we hugged again and he left shul. Rebbe says every year when I get up here by the stender for Kol Nidrei, there's 2,000 people in the audience. But I go back to that Kol Nidrei Motzaei Yom Kippur, and it's only me and God and this Jew alone. And his simplicity, his unsophisticated oneness, the pshittis von Ayid, the pshittis von Apintalayid, it just touches me so deeply. That's what triggers my emotions every Kol Nidrei. My dear friends, why do I tell you this story? Because I believe the same story happens also in Monsey, and even in Borough Park, and even in Lakewood, and even in Williamsburg, and even in Monroe, and even in Crown Heights, and even in Golders Green and Stamford Hill, and even in Bnei Brak, and even in Yerushalayim. I'm not talking about Jews who come the next night. I'm talking about Jews who come the first night. I'm talking about Jews who even come for Selichos 1 o'clock a.m. B'Motzaei menucha kidam nuchat chila, and yet when we come we find that the gates are locked. And I don't mean the physical gates. Physical gates, Baruch Hashem, are not locked. The physical gates and portals are open. I'm talking about the gates of the heart, the gates of the soul. How many people show up? They show up physically, but emotionally, some of us feel so disconnected, so apathetic, so estranged, so alienated. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Selichos, Elul, Tishrei, we show up. There's so much guilt. There's so much guilt. There's so much pressure. There's so much fear. I show up, but ich bin nicht da. The gates of my brain, the gates of my soul are just locked. I don't feel celebration. I don't feel intimacy. I don't feel dveikus. I don't feel oneness. I'm just going through the motions. And I'm taking my kids also through the motions, because what should I do? But I'm just going through the motions. But you know what this Jew had a schos. And Reb Tzadok understood that Yom Kippur is about him himself. There's a special Kol Nidrei for you, my dear friend. When Avraham Avinu comes over the Akedah, what does the Malach tell him? The Malach tells him, Harbe Arbe Zaracha. Remember? Kichoich ve'ashamayim v'chachoil ashal svasayom. Your children will be like stars, and your children will be like sand by the ocean. Why both? You know how many stars there are in the heavens? Anybody knows how many stars? Well, today we know that the number of stars is half of a. We don't even have the number for it. Not billion, not trillion, not zillion. Unbelievable. Chachoil hayam, how many grains of sand by all the beaches, all the lakes, all the oceans? A nice amount. Why both? So let me tell you, my dear friends, what's the difference between sand and stars? You ever picked up a grain of sand? You ever brought home a grain of sand and you showed your children, look at a grain of sand? There's mamish nothing to see. One grain of sand doesn't have much value. Try selling it. It's not even a shaveh prut of Yimakadosh and Yisha with a grain of sand. It's now Kiddushin, it's worthless. Oh, but if you have together, if you have a beach, you have thousands, millions, billions, trillions of grains of sand. Now it becomes a chabed, becomes a psachef, it becomes something important. What about stars? Each star is an isolated universe, an isolated planet, and what happens when you bring stars together? Not good. It creates explosions. It creates the obliteration, the deaths of stars. Each star ought to be independent. So Hashem told Avraham Avinu, let me tell you about your people. Harbe arbe zaracha kechoich ve'ashamayim v'chachol ashal svasayom. You're going to be like the sand of the sea. Me, myself, chani la'atzmi, mo ani, I'm a grain of sand. Together we create what's called Knesset Yisrael. But that's one dimension. There's another dimension of Klal Yisrael called Kechoich ve'ashamayim. It's about you. You and you alone. Your life, your soul, your individuality, your relationship, your consciousness. We're all one, and we're all also distinctive. Chayav Adam Loimar B'Shvili Nivra Elah. I want to bless you, my dear friends. You should have the same feeling of the Jew in Frankfurt, and know that even if you feel, everybody feels they came late. We all feel we came late. How many people say, if I only would have known this 20 years ago, I would have been different. But I showed up 20 years late. If I would have only known this 40 years ago. When I was a child, somebody told this to me. Today I might have been normal. But nobody told this to me. I'm late to the game. So ich bin verhackt und verblutet und verblutigt und verwundet und verchmuret. These are Yiddish words that speak about self-confidence. We all came late. Not just you came late to Yim, I came late. I'm just not part of it. So I want to tell you, the Ribono Shel Olam has a Kol Nidrei waiting for you. You don't have to look around. You don't have to compare yourself to others. You don't have to contrast yourself to others. This year, it's between you and God yourself. It could be 2,000 people. There could be one person. There could be 20 people. It's you. Open your heart. Open your soul. The relationship is all yours. The Heilige Dagel Machane Ephraim says, what do we read on Yom Kippur? You remember? V'chol adam lo yeh ba'oyel moyeh. Nobody is allowed to be there. What does Hashem tell Moshe Rabbeinu? Come up on the mountain. V'ish lo yalei mach. Nobody should come up with you. Says the Heilige Dagel Machane Ephraim, I think in Parshas Monsey. When you go up on the mountain, you have to imagine there's no person beside you. V'ish lo yalei mach. V'chol adam lo yeh ba'oyel moyeh. You want to go into holiness, there can't be anybody there. So many of us, our whole life is about what it looks like to other people. social conformity. I have to make an impression. They have to say my family is a good family. You can't go up on the mountain. You can't go into the Holy of Holies if you don't emancipate yourself from that. You know why that Jew had a Yom Kippur? Because there was nobody else there. Nicht gedacht die Oitze sei. Should be able to say it's me and God alone. Your heart, your soul, your struggles, your truth, your identity. Hine matoiv umanoyim sheves achim gam yochad. How good and how sweet, how pleasant when brothers sit together. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, everybody knows it. Why does David HaMelech say matoiv umanoyim? What's matoiv umanoyim? I'll tell you one way of looking at it, my dearest friends. There are things in life that are good, but they're not pleasant, they're not sweet. There are things that are sweet but are not good. L'mashal, cheesecake. Cheesecake is noyim. It's a ganz noyim. Right? Some people think alcohol. Some people think chaluptzes. A piece of steak, it's noyim. It's geschmack. Is it toiv? It's good. The malach hamavis. Ask your nutritionist. Ask your doctor. Ask your wife. Malach hamavis. There are things in life that are toiv. They're good. Spinach. Kale. Lettuce. Barley kernels. Wheatgrass. It's toiv. It's very good. Everybody will say it's unbelievable. Noyim? Somehow for potato chips, nobody has to develop an appetite. You put down 7-layer cake, it goes. A piece of lettuce, even though it's God's snack, 7-layer cake is human corruption. Lettuce is the chmamish abriya b'dei shamayim. But nonetheless, it's maybe toiv, it's not noyim. In life, there's a lot of things that are good, but they're not necessarily pleasant. There are a lot of things in life that are pleasant. They feel good. Texting. But it's not good. It's noyim, it's not good. There are a few things in life that are toiv and noyim. One of them is Sheves Achim Gam Yochad. When brothers get along, when people get along, when sisters get along, David HaMelech says it's good and it's also geschmack. It's also pleasant. Why do I say this to you? For whatever reason, we live in a time that there are people, for whatever reasons, there's somebody they're not on speaking terms with. This one is in a fight with his brother. This one is in a fight with his sister. This one doesn't speak to his father. This one doesn't speak to his brother-in-law. This one doesn't speak to her sister-in-law. This one doesn't speak to his in-laws. This one doesn't speak to his neighbor, to his shutuf, to his employer, to his employee. And everybody has good reasons. Excuses, reasons, and they may even be right. What you're missing out on life is matoiv umanoyim. It comes the time of slichus. We have to have the courage, pick up a phone, make a call, and say mashahoya hoya. You don't have to be right in life. As we said many times, it's much more important to be happy than it is to be right. There are families that fight for 30, 40 years because of a business dispute, because of a Yerusha. Rabbi, that's what Yiddishkeit boils down to? That you're not speaking to your brother, you're not speaking to your nephews, you can't have a normal family get together. We become so petty and we lose the most important, valuable moments in life just that I should be able to maintain a sense of righteousness and victory. Malchus Shal! Don't be a beggar, be a melech. It's a pasnish for a melech not to be on speaking terms with somebody because of a financial reason or even because he didn't give you bracha achrita by his chuppah. Or Siddur Kedushin, or not even Bracha Rishona. A Yid called me, he had to do a Siddur Kedushin, and he said they want I should give 50 people kibbudim, 50. There's only 7 brachas. So I told him, do what I do. He says, what do you do? I said, I give out the al-chetz. You just have to get the right al-chet for the right person. You have to know everybody's story. You're going to tell somebody, one guy needs b'maichel b'mishta, one guy needs b'yoydim or b'lo yoydim. Der Jid was a bejoidem, a beloyoidem. Man weiß, aber man macht sich nicht wissentlich. He didn't like my idea. Hinei matoiv umanoyim sheves achim gam yochad. There shouldn't be anybody in the world from your perspective that you can't speak to, that you can't give a hug, that you can't be kind to, that you can't be hospitable to. But the chachelik elikam imal mamish. Das passt for chelik elikam imal mamish for piece of Hashem. But now I want to share with you a story. I heard this story. Mamish, it'd be hard for you to believe. 9:45 tonight, I was preparing to come here. And my phone rings. And I see Belgium. It's a call from Belgium. In Belgium, it's not so early now. It's pretty late in Belgium. Who's calling me from Belgium in the middle of the night? So I picked up the phone. The Yid introduces himself. His name is Reb Feivel Shapiro. Feivel Shapiro is a Yid from Antwerp, from Antwerpen, from Belgium. He lives in Belgium. And he told me that he wants to share with me a story. And this is not a story of Klei Chamishi, Klei Revi, Klei Shlishi, Klei Sheni. This is a story of Klei Rishon. It's a story that happened with him himself, and he told it to me tonight, Motzaei Shabbos Selichos, a few minutes before I came here. And I want to share this story with you. It's a very, very powerful, very moving story. His mother, Rachel, came from a Satmar family. Satmar Chassidim, already back in Europe before the war. His father, Reb Naftali Herz, Zechrono Levracha, was a Talmud Muvik of the Damesek Eliezer, from Vishnitz. His mother was from Satmar, his father was from Vishnitz. He, all his life, davens in bells. So we have bells, Vishnitz, Satmar, Kolonik Yachad. And I'm telling the story.
I'm recording
it. So the Feivel tells me tonight. It was 1 year Purim. And he came to America. He's a businessman, a well-known, affluent businessman, a well-connected person in Belgium. He's an askin, he's an activist, he's a businessman, he's a successful person. He came here once to America, he was here Purim. This was in the 1970s, early 70s. And he decided to go see what's happening. He wanted to check out the Lebowitz Rebbe. So he went to Brooklyn, to the Kronite section of Brooklyn. Lebowitz Rebbe would hold a Purim Fabrengen, a Purim gathering for many hours every Purim night, Motzaei Purim. He told me I was there. It was very, very long. He said the Rebbe had geret and verbracht, and it went on until late, the middle of the night, 2 in the morning, or 3 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. It was very late. So the Rebbe finished, and he walked out from the big shul to go upstairs to his room, private office, and then probably go home. He says, by us the minig is, me get shulam tzadeben. You go and you give a shulam aleichem to the Lebowitz Rebbe, to a Rebbe. So that's what I decided I want to do. I just want to go greet him, give him my hand. So as he was walking back to his room, I stood there on the path, 2 or 3 in the morning. He says he didn't remember the hour, but it was very late. And I stretched out my hand to give him shalom aleichem. He said there were 2 gaboyim around. Didn't know their names, but 2 gaboyim there. They looked at me and they said, come on, nicht jetzt ist die Zeit. Nicht jetzt ist die Zeit zu geben shalom zum Rebbe. Now is not the time to give your hand and start greeting the Rebbe, sitting a whole night. So I was new. He says, ich bin gewinn schockiert. I was taken aback, I was shocked. And I pulled back my hands. So he said, but the Rebbe noticed when I stretched out my hand, he noticed what happened. So the Rebbe stretched out his hand. And he took my hand. So I thought he'll give me shalom. And he wouldn't leave go. And he started to walk with me, holding my hand. He comes to his room. And he takes me into his room. He says, this was surprising. I didn't ask him anything. I didn't tell him anything. I just wanted to say shalom aleichem, aleichem shalom, 5 seconds. But it was near his room, so he was taking with my hand. He took me into the room. He closed the door. He said he himself took a seat, took another chair, put it by his desk, and he said, Setz dich weg. Sit down. So I sat down. I didn't know what he wants. But I sat down. The Gaboyim at this point, there was nothing they could do. He went in, he closed the door. So the Rebbe opened the drawer, took out a key. And he went to one of his cabinets, a filing cabinet. And he opened up a drawer that was locked, he took out a piece of paper. He gives me the piece of paper and he says, Nadir Lane, here is the piece of paper, read. So Feivel tells me, he says, I start reading a letter that a lady wrote to the Lebowitz Rebbe in the early 1960s. She writes to him. She comes from a family of Satmar Chassidim. Her husband was from Vishnitz. She was diagnosed with breast cancer. She's 36 years old. She has 12 children. The oldest one is 14. The youngest one is 1 year old. 12 children, 14 to 1. And the doctors are not optimistic about her chances to live. The cancer has spread. They say she doesn't have much time. She herself is ready to give up. She lived her life. She's ready to say goodbye. She's ready to face her Maker in heaven. And she has no complaints. But she has 12 children. And that kills her. It breaks her heart. A 1-year-old boy and a 14-year-old boy. Who will raise them? Who will take care of them? She says, I don't know you and you don't know me. Aber ich betach. I'm asking you, I'm asking the Lebowitz Rebbe, please look out and daven for my 12 children. Think about them, pray for them. They should grow up to be able to be happy people, wholesome people, healthy people. They should be inspired to have Yirah Shamayim and Avos HaTorah and Avos Hashem and Avos Yisrael. Fear of heaven, love of God, love of Torah, love of the Jewish people, and they should follow the derech ha-Torah v'ha-mitzvah. My 12 children should follow the path of Torah and mitzvahs. She signs her name. Feivel tells me she's reading the letter. He's reading the letter. She signs her name, Rachel. Reish Aleph Ches Yud Lamed Shapiro. Says, this is my mother. Mother died when he was 12. He was from the oldest in the family. His oldest brother was 14, he was 12. She left 7 boys and 5 girls. Pitzlach Kinder, Mamish Pitzlach, little ones. And now he's reading a letter in the handwriting of his mother that she wrote shortly before she passed away in the 60s. Tells me, so I'm sitting in the chair and I start crying. I start trembling. I didn't know of such a letter. I was overwhelmed from emotion. I was just weeping. I finished reading. I look at the Lebowitz Rebbe and I say, Ich will beten ein bakosha. I have one thing to ask you. Mom is gestorben so young. My mother died so young. I don't have much of her. Ich will nehmen den Brief mit mir. I want to take this letter with me. I want to have it. The letter that my mother wrote to you about her family, her children, her concerns. I want to have this letter. So Lebowitz Rebbe said, "Nay, no, I can't give you the letter." And I was startled. I knew that he's a Jew who receives tens of thousands of letters. Did he really need to hold on to this letter of another tragedy? Like, here's an orphan. I didn't have a mother so many years. I'm just asking for her letter. Like, I couldn't understand why he would care to part from this letter and just give it to his son when he showed me the letter. And he looked at me and he said, Jede Jahr gehe ich nicht darauf in shofar kol nidrei. Eider ich lein de Mamas Brief. said his language in Yiddish was, ich kann nicht darauf gehen zu Kol Nidrei. Fahr dem, was ich lein the Mama's brief. Every year, Yom Kippur. I can't go down to shul to daven Kol Nidrei Yom Kippur at night before I don't read your mother's letter. This letter has to stay here. Reb Feivel tells me the night after Purim, I stood up, trembling, I walked out of the room. Then he tells me, ich kann sich nicht meuchel sein. He says, Rabbi, why? Ich kann sich nicht meuchel sein, adayoyim. I can't forgive myself till today why I didn't say Lebowitz Rebbe. How in the world did you know who I am and that this was my mother? I came over to you after Purim, I gave you a hand. I can't forgive myself. Why didn't I ask him? How do you know it's me? Why did you take me into a room? How do you know to put the two together? I didn't even say my name. How did you know this? So I say, why didn't you ask him? Why didn't you ask him? He said, I was so overwhelmed from emotion. When he told this to me about Kol Nidrei, first seeing the letter, and then when he told me, I was speechless. But then when I went down, I said, oh yeah, I should have asked him. So I said to Feivel, how did he know? How did he know? And why did your mother write him a letter? So I can't tell you how he know what I say. He says, I guess, et gesehen Sachen was andere sehen. Saw things maybe that other people don't see. He looked at me, saw. Then he says, what happened was as follows. He says, my father was a starke student of the Damascus Eliezer. But when he came to Antwerp, he wanted a Chassidish minyan, there was bells, he went to bells. He used to come to America a lot. He was a successful businessman. He was involved in Macy's and other things. And he used to go visit the Helike Divrei Yoel, the Satmar of Schisse Yogan Alayni. He said, I enjoy speaking to him. Satmar of said, as a Kliga Yid, it's a smart joint. He told me he would spend hours. A few times he went to him, he spent a few hours with the Satmar Rebbe. And he says, I heard from my father. This is what he told me tonight. I heard from my father that once he was sitting by the Satmar Rebbe, by the Divrei Yoel. They started to speak about Lebowitz. The Satmar Rebbe, he said, told my father these words. Aher ahin, here or there. You could look at it here or there. Let me tell you the truth. Whenever a Jew comes to me, I feel it's a situation that's too difficult for me. I can't deal with it. I don't know what to say. I send it to the Lebowitz Rebbe. Das ist der Emes. So my father told me when my mother got so sick, and he was by the Satmar. Satmar told this to him. So he says he went to my mother. And he said an interesting thing I heard from the Satmar of, that when he doesn't know how to deal with the situation, he sends the Lebowitz Rebbe. So my mother, without telling him, wrote this whole letter to the Rebbe because based on what she heard from my father. But nobody knew about it. The Rebbe showed it to me many, many years after her passing. So I said, "No, tell me about the family." He says, "You should know that the 12 kids grew up. It was spectacular people, normal, fine people. Every person got married, built beautiful families." Started telling me where everybody is, their families, their children. At this point, the Chashish gehalten cup. And then I thought to myself, this is just a personal memory, and I'm not saying it's connected, I'll just tell you an experience. I grew up in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. Lebowitz Rebbe didn't have children, as you know. Erev Yom Kippur is the Chaminik by Yidden that you bless your children. So he asked all the Bachim of the yeshiva, all the students of the yeshiva to come into his room. And he would bless them like children, like a father blesses children with Birchas Koyanim. And after Birchas Koyanim, he would add words. It was very, very emotional. I was there quite a few years as a yeshiva bacher. I could tell you, it was one of the most emotional experiences of my life. The Rebbe would cry, the boys would cry. He would say the whole Birchas Koyanim, Yivarechecha Adonai v'Yishmerecha Yorad, and it was very Yorad Adonai Panav Elecha v'Chunek, Yisa Adonai Panav Elecha v'Yosmach Hashem. It was very, very emotional. After he would finish the bracha to the two boys, he was ready in his kittel, in his talis, everything. He would go back to his room for a few minutes, and then he would come down for Kol Nidrei. As a yeshiva bach, I was always curious why he doesn't go straight down to shul. What he does between the bracha to the students, to the Talmidim, and Kol Nidrei. I still don't know the answer. But when Feivel told me the story, I had a flashback of me asking myself, why is the Rebbe doesn't go straight? He was already coming out to the boys. Why did he just go straight down to shul? But he told them, I don't go down to shul before Kol Nidrei, before I read this letter. And I thought to myself when I heard this tonight, that there's such a powerful story for each and every one of us. Why? Because every one of us in our own way has to be today a little Manig Yisrael, a little leader of the Jewish people. This was a Satmar family, a Belzer family, a Vishnitzer family. No connection to Chabad whatsoever. It wasn't part of the Rebbe's Kehillah, his Anshe Shloimaini. It's not part of his Chevra. He didn't know them, they didn't know him, at least on the surface. And yet before Kol Nidrei, the holiest moment of the year, the Rebbe felt he couldn't go down to shul before he took out every single year a letter of a mother asking him to daven for her 12 children. They should be able to have a happy and beautiful and successful and meaningful and inspiring and Yiddish and Torah and godly year. And I realized the Balatanya writes, how do you know what a leader is? How do you know what a manig is? Look in the body. How do you know which part is the brain? How do you know that it's a brain? How do you know it's a healthy brain? The definition of a brain is that it feels every part of the body. If a brain says, this nail, I don't care about nails. This nail, who is he? A toenail? You want me to you're not a brain. If you're a brain, you feel the kidneys, you feel the heart, you feel the lungs, you feel the pancreas, you feel the liver, but you also feel a toenail. You also feel a strand of hair. You feel every bone, every limb, every organ, every tissue, every sinew, every cell. That's what a brain is. How do you know the brain of Klal Yisrael? How do you know who is a brain, who is a Rosh Alpha Yisrael, who are the brains of the Jewish people? Somebody who says, this is not my department, this is not my domain, sorry, I'm busy. You're a good guy. But you can't be a Moyach, you can't be a Rosh Bnei Yisrael. A brain feels every single chelik of the guf, and all Knesset Yisrael is one guf. And I say to you today, my Tayed Yidden, what do you learn from this? Today, every person has to be a little Manig Yisrael, I promise you. Around you, around me, there are those families, those 12 children that need that extra love, extra stamina, extra tefillah, extra embrace, extra prayer. Don't just think about yourself. Don't just think about myself or about your own chevra, your own clique. That's beautiful. But I bless you all that we should all be able to see a letter of a mother, to see a letter of a child written in ink or written in blood, written in ink or written in tears, written in ink or written in silence. And to be able to know that I can't go down for Kol Nidrei if I don't care, if I don't reach out, if I don't open my heart to them. We can't afford to be selfish, to be narcissistic, to focus only on our own. Let me tell you a gewaldige Wort. The Baal Shem Tov had a student, his name was Reb Chaim Rappaport. Reb Chaim HaKoyen Rappaport, he was the Rav of a city called Lvov. Lvov is also known as Lemberg. Used to be in Poland, today it's in western Ukraine, Lvov. The pre-Megadim The pre-Megadim uniquely in Arachayim, Rosh Hashanah Tov Kuf Tzadik Beis. Eishel Avram, he says something he heard from Reb Chaim HaKoyen Rappaport from Lviv, a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov. The Pri Megadim brings this in Halacha, and when he says is as follows: Rosh Hashanah, we say Shmoneh Esrei, a very interesting closure. We say Kiyata Shomeya Kol Shofar. You hear the voice of the shofar, Umazin Trua, and you hear the Trua, Ve'ein Dai Melach, and there's nobody compared to you. You hear the shofar, Shomeya Kol Shofar. You're Mazin Trua, Ve'ein Dai Melach. So the Pri Megadim says here from Reb Chaim Rappaport the following explanation. Moshe says, Hazinu Hashamayim v'sishma ha'aretz. So the Sifri says Moshe was close to heaven. Hazinu is if somebody's close. V'sishma is if somebody's far. That's why Yeshaya says, Shimu Shamayim v'azini eretz. He was close to earth, he was far from heaven. So Moshe says Hazinu Hashamayim, Yeshaya says Hazini Eretz, Shimu Shamayim. We say Rosh Hashanah, Shomeya Kol Shofar, Umazin Trua. You hear the Kol Shofar from far, you hear the Trua, Mazin, Hazinu from close. What's the difference between Kol Shofar and Trua, says the Pri Megadim. So he says Shofar is the straight sound, Du Tkiya. Trua, as the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, is the broken sound. Yom Trua Yevava. Or Yevava or Yelala. Shvarim or Trua, it's the broken sound. There are two types of people in the world. There are people who look in the mirror and they say, life is perfect. Anybody? Life is perfect. And then there are people who look inside themselves and they go, oi, 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 shvarim or trua, oi, 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 oi. So we say in davening, you're shomeya kol shofar, umazin trua. Sometimes when you feel unwhole, that's when you're the closest, because it's the humility, it's the honesty, it's the vulnerability that makes you closest. When you feel that brokenness, that imperfection, don't think God is far from you. That's when He's closest to you, because it's real, it's authentic, it's raw. There's no arrogance, there's no smugness. There's nobody like you. Most people run away from brokenness, but not you. You want, as he puts it from the Medrash, you want the Kli Shavor more than the Kli Gomor. The broken vessel is more precious to you. So my friends, wherever you look around today, there are so many people who feel so much brokenness. Even though there's so many blessings out there, but there's also so much disappointment and heartache. We can't go down to our old Kol Nidre, we can't go to our own Slichas, our own Rosh Hashanah. If we don't take out these letters and have the courage to connect. Sei mechazek ayid, hab holt ayid, sag a good word to ayid, lift up sparks, ignite souls. Don't be stingy with love. Don't be stingy with words. Don't be stingy with warmth. Join us. I can back Everybody join us. Before we go to Selichos, I'll just leave you with this last reflection or idea. The Helikas Sar Shalom of Bells, Schissa Yogan Alaini once said, Lavan tells Yaakov Avinu, I could hurt you, but Vashem Elekei Avichem, God spoke to me emesh, he spoke to me yesterday, and he told me, don't speak to Yaakov mitoiv v'yadro. Don't speak to Yaakov good or bad, don't talk to him. So the Sar Shalom of Bel says emesh is an acronym, Shabbos Mevorchim Elul. Lavan, the Gemara associates with Lavan with Bilam, Arami Yovid Avi, the Yitzhara. Lavan says, Hashem came to me emesh. He told me from Shabbos Mevorchim Elul, don't talk to Jews, mitoy v'yadra. What's pshat mitoy v'yadra? So the Helikas Sar Shalom, there's two types of voices in you tonight. Comes Elul, comes Tishrei, there's two types of voices in you. I'm going to describe each one, and if it fits you, you could raise your hand. The first voice says, Toiv, I'm such a good guy, I'm so handsome. Right? Anybody? Nobody? I'm so perfect. No? I'm so beautiful. I'm so holy. I'm just the best guy in the world. There's nothing for me to repair. There's nothing for me to fix. But then there's another voice in you, and the other voice says, Ra, I'm a lowlife. Ich bin a schmutziger Terror-Adam. Ich bin a Chayer, a Scheigitz, a Baheime, a Poshei Yisrael, a Sheretz. I'm a disappointment to God. I'm so lowly, I'm so despicable. I'm full of guilt. I know what's going on in me. It's a hopeless situation. I don't give a hoot about anything. Says the Sar Shalom, the Zelbi Yitzhara that tells you you're so good is the same one who tells you you're so bad, and in a way it's much worse. So from Shabbos Mevorchim Elul, you have to be careful not to listen to Lavan. Even Lavan says, don't tell people mitoiv v'yadra, because that is a similar challenge. I am just a closed up soul. I'm the guy who doesn't care. It's a lie. As the Gemara says in Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Mem Gimel about Achan who violated the promise, the commandment not to touch the spoils, the cherem of Yerichai. And it says about Achan, Hashem said, Chata Yisrael, Yisrael sins of the Gemara. Afal pi shechata Yisrael, even though he sinned, he's a Yisrael. But I want you to think about this point. Gemara tells there are stories on Eden Daf Mem Gimel when Hashem told Yeshua, Chata Yisrael, somebody sinned. Yeshua said, who? So Hashem said, V'chidiltolani, I'm a Baal Lashon Hara, I say gossip. I'm not going to tell you who sinned. I refuse. He says, how am I supposed to know? He says, make a girl. I'm not going to tell you. Hashem refuses to tell Yeshua who sinned. Come to the next piece of Gemara. You could look it up. The Gemara says, Achan didn't just sin. We learn out from the Psukim. Moishech bar Lasoi. He got rid of his bris. Over al Chamishachum Shetoira. Baal Naira Amurasa. He had relations with a married woman in addition to violating the cherem of Yeshua and 2 chram in the time of Moshe. And I ask you a shaila. Rebbe Shalom says he doesn't want to say who Achan is. I don't say Lashon Hara. So the Gemara mutshut sich to find out from the Psukim how bad Achan is. God says I don't want to say Lashon Hara, but the Gemara will make sure you find out everything bad about Achan. Why? One of the answers that's given is because the Gemara learns out from Achan, Afal pi shechata Yisrael, even though he sinned is a Yisrael. Hashem says Chata Yisrael, he's still a Yisrael. So you might think when you have a Bishachata Yisrael, who are you talking about? You're talking about a good guy, a Yid mit a shene Bekeshe, a shene Gartel, a shene Streimel. Once in a while he eats a little too much cholent. Once in a while he does a little sin. But I know myself. I know my issues are very, very deep. For me, this statement was not said. I'm the real sinner. Zog the Gemara. I'll tell you who Achan was. Let me tell you who Achan was. On him, the Rebbe Shalom said, Afal pi shechata Yisrael. Greatest mistake you could make in the world, Rabbi Kalina said, is that you forget that you're a prince. You forget how beautiful, how wholesome, how holy, how splendid you are. Let me finish with a story. It's a maisa that comforts, it's a maisa that challenges. Say it, the kids, it's a deep story. So given Ayid, the Rebbe Rayatz, the sixth Lebowitz Rebbe, father-in-law of the most recent Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef, passed away in 1950. He suffered tremendous in the Soviet Union. He was sentenced to death and then to 10 years in the Gulag and 3 years in the Gulag. He made it out at the end, B'nisei Nissa. He carried Russian Jewry on his shoulders. Built 600 underground yeshivas in Stalin's years. Abnormal. Haflavafal. Came to America in 1929 to the Chazak American Jews and to raise money for Russian Jewry, which was in desperate need of everything. You know, communist Russia in the 20s and the 30s was literally a living hell on earth. You'll forgive me. I know both of my parents came from there. Came to America. He was a Yid who grew up in the Alte Heim. Came here, like a pauper. Like many Jews, he started off as a tailor. A Schneider, a tailor. But he built himself up. And he ultimately became a gewaldige, successful businessman in textiles and tailoring and fabrics. And he built a successful company. And he was a very, very wealthy and affluent Jew. And he had a connection from the old home. He had a connection to the previous Lebowitz Rebbe, to the Rayat, something in the family. But they told him he won't give you a penny because he's so far from Yiddishkeit. He was one of those, so to speak, that they threw off the Atlantic, the tefillin in the Atlantic, metaphorically speaking. He's one of those Jews. He says, I want to go see him. He goes to see him and he sits down and he says, Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom. Where are you coming from? I'm coming from Riga. He lived in Latvia. I'm coming from Riga. Welcome. He says, what brings you here? So the Rebbe said, I have a button on the kapote and it's about to fall off. They say about you, you are a world-renowned tailor. So I came to you to fix my button. He says, Rebbe, you're making fun of me. You came from Latvia to the United States to fix a button? Thousands of miles you traveled on a boat, 2 weeks to come to fix a button. 2 weeks on a boat to fix a button. Thousands of miles. He says, a good shaila. It's a good question. I want to ask you the same question. I traveled from Riga to America, 2 weeks. But your soul traveled from infinity to earth. Your soul is a chelik elokamimal. Your soul is a piece of God, Mamish Hashem Himself. And you traveled not a few thousand miles. You traveled on an infinite journey. Tell me, just to fix buttons? Just to fix buttons? Your soul, you know who your soul is? Your soul is a piece of the divine. Your soul is a ray of infinity. Your soul is a fragment Kivayachal of Hashem Himself. Your soul is awesome. Your soul is perfect. Your soul carries within itself the whole world and all of reality. You're telling me that this journey was just to fix buttons? When a person realizes this, then we realize the greatest mistake is to be able to put yourself down, to belittle what is at stake in your life, how much power, how much potential. May each of us have the courage, Malchus Shal, not to daven like a beggar, but to daven like a king, because that's who you are. May the Rebbeinu Shalom bestow upon each and every one of you you should fulfill all of your heart's desires. People are sitting here, all of your heart's desires for yourself, for your family, for your children, for health, for prosperity, for happiness, for gashmias, for ruchnias. Everyone in your personal lives, everything you need, b'toich Klal Yisrael, should be a year of true oire v'simcha v'sasim v'ikar lanu l'chol beis Yisrael and hikir ashnas geula, ashnas Yeshua b'meira b'yameinu, amen l'chayim. Tayre Yidin, we're going to go now for slichas b'Motzaei menucha. Kidam menucha tchila l'shmoya el harina schon gehört. Now we'll go to El Harina Ve'el Tefillah. Based on the request of many, Rabbi Yoli is going to lead a slichas here in this room. Ki Yad Hashem HaToiva Alav in this room, right? There's also going to be another minyan of slichas in that room. It's a separate room, a separate zal, another minyan of slichas. In the regular traditional way here, it's going to be with the Lishmoya El Harina together with the Tefillah. Huh?
That's where I was in the end.
Whoever wants, this is Hine Matoivu Manoyim Sheves Achem Gam Yochad. Can enjoy this slichas, enjoy that slichas, and oizbeten alle gute Sachen. A gute Vod.
My mother is the youngest daughter of Rebbe.
Oh, wow.
Not the whole story, just the story that we had a letter or whatever.
Here you go.
No, it's fine.
For those of you who have doubts, a Yid just came over to me and he said, my mother is the youngest daughter of Rachel Shapiro. Und gib a cook of a tire younger man, huh? The Rebbe get gedavent. The Rebbe get gedavent for the.
Oh, okay.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.